I hear him. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Maybe eventually we do get that Devin Haney Teofimo fight, but I don't think that's going to happen either. I think Teofimo's going to vacate and move up to try to test Josh Taylor at junior welterweight. And I don't want to dismiss Kambosos because I feel like everybody's writing him off. But I think Lee Selby being your hardest test he's got an uphill battle facing Teofimo, but he seems focused. And I think the fight is on October 4th. Last I checked, but I think they're trying to move it to October 16th.
So there's been a massive thing with that just today, funnily enough. The situation is George Kambosos has filed a complaint to the IBF and wants the fight to go to purse bids again. So he basically is saying he doesn't want Triller to put on this fight. Teofimo Lopez hasn't agreed to it yet. But if it does go through and Teofimo Lopez agrees, this fight could go into the hands of Matchroom because they came second in the bid for that fight. So we were talking about that with DAZN making that fight, and I think that's a very good DAZN fight. I don't think it's like a Triller sellout pay-per-view type thing. You know, it's not they're not megastars yet. They can't really be trying to make that megastar money. No one really knows George Kambosos from the outside the core realm. And Teofimo Lopez hasn't built up his resume yet. He had one great upset win against Lomachenko, but he still has to build his career up in the same way as everyone else. He's just done it almost too early. That the pinnacle of his career has happened at the age of 23, which is sometimes too early.
Brutal.
Why? No, it has. What all boxers,
right.
their whole goal is to become, arguably undisputed at their weight class for him in the lightweight division. You know, that's their only goal, and for him to do that in one fight at 23 years old is kind of unheard of. You know, the likes of Mike Tyson became world champion at 20 years old, and you know it's a very young age to be doing that. And he didn't go to the Olympics. He was meant to represent Honduras. So, you know, he's very young to be in the spotlight this early.
I agree. I don't know what's going on with the inside with Triller and whatever Ryan Kavanaugh's been posting or whatever's going on with him in the news, but it looks like Triller's going to go bust because I guess they're not going to have the fight on October 4th, or I guess they're pushing for October 4th. It looks like Teofimo wants it on October 16th, and he's agreed to it, and now they're just throwing jabs back and forth on Twitter, and I'm just like, dude, I don't know. Can we see this damn fight? Because if they go to purse bid again, we might not see that fight till November, December. But hey, it is what it is. It looks like the end of the year is going to look really nice regardless for boxing, but maybe we don't get that fight this weekend. Bummer. But
I think Matchroom have already made a statement saying that they would make that fight towards the end of the year. So if it does happen, I can see it happening in December with Matchroom and DAZN, which would be brilliant, to be honest. I think that's the exact fight for their platform.
Oh, Triller is losing money left and right. Triller might be out of the professional boxing game with this one if they blow this, because they've already lost millions in rescheduling and getting the fight dates and locations and stuff set. So it's all bad. Ooh. Well,
I hope Triller are out the game, because for professional boxing, you know, they're terrible. They're fraudulent. They've caused, you know, a near-death experience for Evander Holyfield with Vitor Belfort. I know your view on that. But at the end of the day, you know,
I agree.
They sanctioned that. They were the ones that got the sanctioning from that fight from the Florida Athletic State Commission, and it's just wrong. So I think they've done bad things for boxing, to be honest with you. I don't think they've done anything good for the sport.
I had a lot of high hopes on Triller. I thought they were going to shake stuff up, and they've totally made a circus. They've made a circus out of their opportunity. So if they get out the game, so be it. We'll leave it up to the.
It always happens, though. It always happens when this new market disruptor comes in, or so-called market disruptor, and they're making all these ridiculous claims, and everything's too good to be true. It was never going to work from the get-go. Promising all this money, and you know, they were pulling out their arse basically. Especially with the Teofimo fight, offering $7 million to both fighters, and Teofimo getting something like $6 million and Kambosos $1 million. You know, where's that money coming from? They don't make that kind of money yet.
Russian investors. I don't know. I don't know where the money comes from.
Oh, yeah, they had. I think they received about 400 million in investment for the Fight Club or whatever it was for the app. But I can see that it would be from, pretty dodgy sources, to be honest.
Well, DAZN came in and did all right. They were a relatively new company when they first came in the game, weren't they?
So DAZN are backed by one of the richest men in the UK, and they're not just doing boxing; they're doing other sports. They even looked at acquiring BT Sport recently, which is a huge move here in the UK. Of course, I'm presuming you're aware of Frank Warren, Queensberry Promotions, there who work with BT Sport. So DAZN want to acquire BT Sport, and I think they're making very smart, calculated moves in the market. And I think they want to be, the next streaming service to take over, not just boxing, but other sports as well. I think they're in baseball, they're in football, they're in basketball, they're in lots of different sports, I believe.
Well, I like what they've done with boxing so far, so I have no complaints on that one. I definitely get a lot of the good European boxing events out there, and I think it's smart for them to focus on the European market. I think that's very intelligent on their part. So
I'm not sure about the $199 to $799 price raise, but yeah, they got a lot of stick for that, and I don't think they're really providing the fights that we expect for $799 a month. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, the price going up it's a heartbreaker. I have DAZN, so I'm just like, hey, I'll roll with it for right now. I'll bite the bullet because so far I've been pretty content, but I don't see American audiences really jumping on that train too heavy if they don't really focus heavy on the American market, which it looks like they're not even worried about anymore. So
I'm not sure. It's an interesting one because I think that they really need to up their game if they actually want these casual fans to come and buy their subscription. For now, I'm in it because I have to be. I have to watch all the fights. It's a business expense for us too. We have to watch these fights. We have to know what's going on. But if you don't care too much for boxing, there's not much enticing going on to be paying $7.99 a month. So they really need to actually change the game, like they said. I don't know if you agree, but
even Tyson Fury chimed in on that. He was chiming in on the price of DAZN increasing. I'm like, oh wow, they're going to be fighting. How do you feel about that fight? Do you feel like it's going to be a competitive fight? Will it be a repeat of the last time? Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury. What's your take?
Tyson Fury beats him even earlier this time, in my opinion. I think Deontay Wilder thinking he can learn how to box in this short of a time is pretty delusional. He's got Malik Scott training him. He beat Malik Scott. Malik Scott can't really teach him anything. I agree with Tyson Fury. What can Malik Scott teach him that he doesn't already know?
I have to agree with that. I've been looking at the feeds, and definitely on this side, I'm sure it's probably a little different in the comment sections going on over there on your side, but I still see a contingency that thinks Deontay Wilder is going to pull it off. And maybe I've been floating around the LDBC end of the social media spectrum. I'm actually seeing comment sections where people are like, Deontay Wilder's going to get this one, and I don't see it. Yeah. I don't see it. I think it's going to be a similar thing, a repeat of that first fight. But now I'm like, maybe my antennas are off after that AJ Usyk fight. Like, do I just not know how to gauge this anymore? But anything can happen in boxing. I'll give it that. But I don't see much difference happening. I don't think Deontay Wilder can increase his skill set to the degree that he needs to match somebody like Tyson Fury. And what's Malik Scott going to do? There was no warm-up fights for him or tune-up fights. He's just going straight from Malik Scott into Tyson Fury. And I don't know. It takes years to learn how to fight on that back foot. And I don't see Malik Scott giving him that ability. And those videos that Deontay Wilder has been releasing, I want to put faith in the American representative here in the heavyweight division. I would love to see Deontay Wilder bring the belts home, but I just don't see anything that really gives me faith in it. And I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'm wondering, is he trolling with the videos he puts out of his training sessions? I'm like, is he doing this to like blow smokescreen? Because it's not a good look.
Deontay Wilder is one of the biggest excuse makers this division's ever seen, and I think he's going to pay for it. I think he's saying some horrific things. He's almost threatening Fury's life. He's talking about life and death. This is a boxing match. I never really dislike a boxer, but if there was any boxer I was going to dislike, it would be Deontay Wilder. He's made excuses. He's threatening Fury's life. He lost. He says he didn't lose the first one. You know, Fury's taken his most powerful punch and he got up. So I don't know what he can do in this fight that would be any different, because even if he clips him, Fury will get back up and bring it to him. Steamroll him.
And it's definitely divided American boxing fans on the subject. And that Glovegate conspiracy is not going away anytime soon. I can't even fathom it. It's so frustrating. I just seen an infographic that got released yesterday, and was it yesterday? The first time I saw it was yesterday, and it showed all of the first 39 opponents of Deontay Wilder and where they were ranked, and it was bad. The guys were ranked 39th, 37th, weren't even ranked, and I don't want to go wax poetic or anything or just disrespect Deontay Wilder, because they're all gladiators and they all deserve respect, but Deontay Wilder didn't handle that loss very well, and I don't believe that Tyson Fury cheated at all. And man, I think Deontay Wilder's in for a world of hurt, and I think it's gonna be bad. I feel like he's got some things going on upstairs that he hasn't really dealt with, and he surrounded himself with yes men, and nobody's telling him, hey, see with more clarity, because I feel like he might just be getting fed the words he wants to hear from inside an echo chamber of relationships inside his personal life, where nobody wants to tell him, hey, champ, you got to do this, or you got to adjust with this, or maybe you should take a step back and take some warm-up fights or tune-up fights, and I don't know. Obviously, we've also got Tyson Fury doing strange stuff. He claimed he had COVID. I'm going to give him the pass on that one. I believe that, but then he's making weird public appearances while he has COVID. Is that all a smokescreen? You never know in this game, but I'm definitely leaning towards Tyson Fury repeating the same thing.
Here's the thing. This fight is most comparable to David Haye versus Tony Bellew. David Haye would convince himself and some of the public that it was Haymaker 2.0. Every time he fought, it's a different David Haye. It's a different this, it's a different that. Completely new style, new boxing, amazing training in Miami and whatnot. All this sort of trying to convince himself, delusional sort of things. He just sounds exactly like Deontay Wilder. Or Deontay Wilder sounds exactly like David Haye. And Tony Bellew would just kept it real, and he said, you can't change the outcome of this fight. And it sort of reminds me of Tyson Fury. I agree. I just think, we'll see a very similar outcome. David Haye got beat by Tony Bellew in the 11th round, so pretty late. And Tony Bellew finished him in 5 rounds in the second fight. So honestly, I think it will be a very similar outcome with this one, where Tyson Fury stopped him in the 7th round, and I think this time he might stop him in 3 to 5.
Goodness. I wouldn't put it outside the realm of reality. Now that Tyson Fury knows he can walk him down with a little punishment, once a guy dog walks you, it's a bad deal. It's kind of like, can AJ make the adjustments to Usyk? We're gonna find out. I think AJ's capable of it, but we're gonna find out. Speaking of delusion, Caleb Plant Canelo. We need to talk about that. Caleb Plant had the little slap boxing contest with Canelo Alvarez, and now it's a bunch of heated tensions going on. Canelo speaking English left and right. He just did the interview with Fight Hype I saw yesterday. He's speaking English, and he's pretty much very dismissive of Caleb Plant. Do you think he's justified in being dismissive of Caleb Plant's skill set?
Here's the thing with Canelo, he works like a beast. He's the most hardworking in that division, and one of the most hardworking boxers in the whole sport. Right? I think he can get away with saying things like that because he's not overlooking Caleb Plant in the gym. He's really working hard. I don't think. I just think Canelo Alvarez, he doesn't overlook anyone.
I'm baffled by why the rest of the industry is not following his lead on fighting multiple times a year. He's making more money than all the other fighters, but he's also fighting 2 to 3 times a year. And I don't know why everyone else isn't taking notes. Like, hey, maybe I should fight any and everyone 2 to 3 times a year.
Because Canelo Alvarez is a true champion and he's one of a kind. That's why. Because these guys can't keep up with Canelo Alvarez. A lot of people like to say that I critique Canelo and whatnot. I'm one of Canelo's biggest fans. I don't want to sound like an arse lick or anything like that, but I love him as a fighter. I was always going to back Billy Joe because he's a Brit and he was one of my favorite boxers growing up. So to try convince myself that Billy Joe could win, it was a bit of fun. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's anyone in that division that could give Canelo problems. And even in the light heavyweight division, I don't think anyone could beat him.
Yeah, it took me a minute to hop on the Canelo train. I was never really against him, but I never really saw what everyone else saw up until, I don't know, I'd say about 3 or 4 years ago when it just started to get ridiculous. His level of domination is, you can't deny it. And he's definitely, when you're at that level of great, you're going to get critics. It is what it is. I don't see what Caleb Plant can bring to the table, but he seems very determined. He looks very focused himself, so I'm hoping it's at least a good scrap for however long it does last. And I don't see what difference Andre Ward is going to make, but like I said, he's got the belt for a reason, even though he's only faced guys like, I don't know, Usagati was probably his toughest challenge, who isn't exactly the most A-lister in the super middleweight division. But yeah, Canelo Alvarez had that interview on Fight Hype. He's speaking English, and it's just fascinating. It's fascinating that he's speaking English so clearly, and I'm like, oh, this is a new level of marketing for him. He's going to touch a lot of bases with the American following. So not that he isn't already America's sweetheart. I don't know how that happened, but
Canelo is, he can overlook Plant. He's not going to, but he can, because at the end of the day, Canelo has had, 59 fights, is it? And he's got the most experience in boxing as of now, right? At the highest level. There are levels to this shit. Like Canelo, he can't be denied at this point. He's fought everyone, and he's been around for a long time. Caleb Plant's resume just doesn't even compare if you look at it. Canelo's been in some of the toughest fights ever. And whether you think he beat Golovkin or not in the second fight, or it was a draw in the first, at the end of the day, he fought the best. He's fought the best. I don't think I could think of anyone he hasn't fought. I think he can. He's right. He's speaking facts when he says that Canelo Alvarez will be the most dominant champion for the next years of boxing. In the next 7 years, no one, I don't see anyone beating Canelo Alvarez unless he stays in the sport too long.
Woo! That's a bold claim. I feel like he'll have some problems at light heavyweight. But
with who?
With any of them at that mass and that size. These guys are 6'1", 6'2", hefty guys.
Callum Smith is 6'2".
I think he might be even taller than that. Is he taller than that?
He might be even 6'3". I mean, I don't think Canelo showed height isn't a factor in this for him. He's a beast. Yeah. Canelo. You know what? After Joshua's performance the other night, if that same Joshua turned up for a Canelo fight, Canelo would have him. Do you know what I mean? Canelo is a beast. He can move up to cruiserweight if he wants to. Not that he will. I think he's comfortable at super middleweight, he said.
He is. It's fascinating watching his run. It's great because you only get these kind of fighters once in a generation. We saw Floyd Mayweather. We had Manny Pacquiao, and now we get to watch Canelo. And I don't know who's going to come up behind him, but it's fascinating. I don't know what's next. I feel like he won't steamroll the light heavyweight division, but I could be wrong. Maybe he's like Roy Jones Jr. and he's just going to come out and blast everybody out too and do the same thing. I don't know.
Exactly the comparison I was about to make. Canelo's very comparable to someone like Roy Jones Jr., who took it a bit too far moving up to heavyweight.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Roy Jones Jr., he stayed in the game too long, and he was trying to fluctuate weights from go from heavyweight to super middleweight and to light heavy, and it was too much on his body, and eventually it caught up with him, and he definitely stayed in the game too long. But when he was in his prime, watching Canelo do what he's doing now, it really looks very similar. Just that level of outright domination is just unbelievable. It's gnarly. And when you get to that level and you're beating guys to that extent, you're going to have your critics. Everyone's going to say, oh, you're not facing your top challengers. Manny was doing the same thing. Floyd was doing the same thing. Just such a ridiculous level of domination. But it's beautiful. That's the sweet science of it. You dedicate yourself and you have the talent to back up that work ethic, and magic can happen. And it's happening in his case. And the slapbox incident was great. I really like Caleb's spirit, though. I got to give it up to Caleb Plant. I can't get enough of his attitude, his mouthpiece. He is selling the fight, and I think that's great when we have personalities like that in boxing, especially considering everyone usually kind of backs down and shows the respectful, I don't know if it's out of fear of Canelo, but I think whatever options you have to try to play the mental chess game, you have to, because you have to throw the kitchen sink at that guy, and it's not even going to matter. Because
Kayla Plant told a very inspiring story, with his daughter and, his growth in the sport and how he started with nothing, just him and his dad. And it was truly inspiring. And, I love his story and his style, but at the end of the day, that won't win you a boxing match. It's heartwarming and whatnot, but this is a brutal sport. This is the hurt business. Canelo's going to beat him. Like, there's no, those, it's all well and good, but Canelo's going to be too much for him.
Have you seen those videos of him fighting in the projects when he was a kid? Like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and he was a great amateur. He was a great amateur.
Yeah, he was my friend Bashir Abdullah, who was the Olympic team coach. He had Caleb there. He was one of the sparring partners for the Olympic team back in like 2012 or something like that. And he tells me the stories about Caleb Plant being a sparring partner back in the day. But he always had a lot of talent. But Canelo Alvarez is a different monster.